Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. Have you ever had that feeling that someone knows more about you than they possibly should? The kind of unease that starts as a whisper in your chest and grows louder with every word, every glance, until you realize that your life has been quietly cataloged by someone who isn't supposed to be there? That's how it started for me. I'm Emma. I was 21, living in a small college town in Oregon. I had moved here a few months earlier after a breakup that left me hollow, questioning my choices, wondering how I'd let myself trust someone so completely. I kept to myself mostly, buried in classes, part-time shifts at a cafe, long walks in the evening when the streets were quiet and the rain blurred neon reflections across puddles. That night, I went to a party hosted by a friend from my literature seminar. The apartment smelled of beer and plastic cups, warm and sticky. Music throbbed low, bass vibrating the floorboards, while conversations mixed into a murmur that buzzed in my ears. Rain streaked the windows, reflecting neon from the street outside. I clutched my jacket, feeling the chill through the thin fabric, watching my friends drift through the crowd. For the first hour, everything felt ordinary, safe even, like any college party I'd attended before. And then he appeared. A man I didn't recognize, leaning casually against the doorway, smiling at the group with an ease that made me suspicious without knowing why. "Hey," he said, smooth-measured. "I'm Alex. I'm a friend of Hannah's." Hannah was someone I knew slightly, someone who had introduced him. But the thing is, Hannah didn't remember meeting him. Nobody remembered him. At first, we laughed it off. New people show up to parties all the time. He was charming, polite, funny even. He circulated among the group, attentive, asking questions that felt comforting. He complimented my jacket, remembered which cafe I worked at, mentioned my favorite latte before I could even order it. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe it made sense. Maybe Hannah had told him. Maybe he had noticed me at the cafe. Maybe I was overthinking. But it didn't stop. He started revealing details that weren't just small observations. He knew that I kept a small notebook tucked in my bag, where I wrote fragments of stories I never shared with anyone. He mentioned lines I had written just 2 days before. He knew about my routine walks home in the rain, the shortcut I always took, even my favorite table in the campus library. I froze. How do you know that?" I whispered, voice shaking. "Because I've been watching," he said softly, calmly. "For weeks." My stomach dropped. Weeks? He had been following me. Every step. My pulse spiked, hands trembling around the cup I was holding. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the distant hum of the refrigerator from the corner kitchenette, the murmur of conversation, even the soft tapping of rain against the window, all of it made my nerves raw and exposed. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he had seen me on social media. Maybe he had glimpsed my routine while walking past the cafe. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense, but my gut told me otherwise. The night spiraled. Each new revelation made me smaller, quieter. He started addressing things I hadn't shared online. Songs I hummed under my breath, small gestures I thought were unnoticed, even conversations I had with my roommate that he shouldn't have known about. "You've always been careful," he said, leaning slightly closer. "You don't realize how obvious you make yourself when you think no one is watching." I swallowed hard, pulse hammering. "Well, what do you mean?" He smiled faintly, an almost predatory calm. "I know your routines, your friends' schedules. When you leave the apartment, where you stop. It's simple once you're predictable." My legs nearly gave out. I wanted to flee, but he moved through the room so casually, so integrated, that there was no escape without attracting attention. And then he laughed softly, almost kindly. "I'm not here to hurt you. Not yet. I just like watching patterns. You'd be surprised how much you reveal without realizing it." We all tried to carry on. The party hummed around us, oblivious. I tried to tell my friends later, but Alex had a way of weaving himself into the narrative, so subtly that our concerns felt misplaced, exaggerated, paranoid. "You're imagining things," one friend said. "He's harmless." I wanted to believe it, I had to. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I had been lonely for too long. I told myself it made sense. But the thrill of his knowledge, his precise observations, his quiet control over the room, they didn't feel harmless. They felt like a cage. Weeks went by. He became a constant presence, not physically, but through digital traces. Photos posted online, subtle messages, comments referencing things I hadn't shared. Every app one opened, every step I took, seemed to be cataloged. My phone buzzed at odd hours with empty notifications. My social media feeds carried little hints that someone was watching, tracking, learning. I started avoiding him at parties. I changed routines, took longer routes home, altered my social media habits. Nothing worked. He adapted, always present in some form, always one step ahead. It escalated the night I returned home from class and found a note slipped under my door. "You're predictable." I like that. No signature. No indication it had come from anyone in the building. Just knowledge. Intimate, precise knowledge. I realized then he wasn't using social media or hacking into devices. He was constructing personas. Burner accounts, fake profiles, fake identities, appearing at different events, at different times, observing, documenting. He was everywhere I had been, unseen, cataloging details for weeks, for months. I tried contacting the police. Evidence was scattered. Photos, screenshots, digital footprints. But each lead was like smoke, disappearing into the complexity of his construction. Multiple victims, multiple identities. No single profile, no single vehicle, no single clue that led directly to him. The confrontation came unexpectedly. I had agreed to meet a friend at a cafe downtown, thinking I might finally feel safe among people. The minute I left my apartment, I felt it, the unmistakable hum of awareness. A figure standing across the street, fading behind a tree as I passed. Not threatening, but precise. Observant. Calm. I reported him immediately. The police investigation unraveled pieces. Multiple burner phones, hundreds of accounts, AI voice clones, meticulous digital surveillance. He had been constructing not just an obsession, but an entire alternate network to watch, control, and manipulate. I survived. I escaped. But I am not the same. My routines are fractured. My trust is fragile. Every notification, every passerby, every reflection in a window now carries the weight of possibility. Even after months, the fear lingers. Rain tapping against the window makes me jump. Neon reflections on wet streets make me tense. Footsteps in empty hallways make my stomach twist. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. That someone doesn't need access to your devices, just observation and patience. That patterns, routines, and trust can be weaponized. And if your gut tells you something is wrong, listen. It might be the only thing keeping you alive. Story 2. I remember standing on the porch, watching the rain smear neon reflections from the streetlights across the wet asphalt. My hands were buried deep in my coat pockets, and I could feel the ache in my chest from the breakup 2 months ago, the quiet aftermath of months of emotional abuse. The world felt thin and fragile, like a cracked window pane about to shatter under the slightest pressure. I had been invited to a friend's birthday party. I wasn't close to anyone really, just acquaintances from work. But the invitation felt like a lifeline, a chance to step into a room full of people, to breathe in warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. I wanted to believe I belonged somewhere, even if just for an evening. The house was large, older, with tall windows that reflected the neon from the wet streets and the dark shapes of trees bending in the wind. The moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me. Faint wood polish, faint smoke from a candle, something metallic underneath, almost like iron. The music was soft at first, jazz, the kind that hums through your chest rather than your ears. I greeted people, nodded at familiar faces, smiled, and felt the weight of my isolation clinging to me like a second skin. That's when I noticed him. Daniel. He was leaning against the wall near the fireplace, eyes calm, attentive, like he had been observing the room long before I arrived. He smiled at me, slow, measured, and I felt the strange pull of safety. Not fake safety, real warmth. He asked subtle questions about my commute, my favorite coffee, even the playlist I'd left on shuffle at home earlier that day. I told myself it made sense. He was observant, maybe even charming, but harmless. The party was loud. Glasses clinked, laughter bounced off high ceilings, and the rain drummed against the windows. But in the corners, shadows pooled. The basement door, low and wide, stood half hidden in darkness, its wooden surface scratched, weathered, with chains hanging loosely across the handle. People rarely went down there. Nobody knew why. Then someone, Tom, one of the louder guys at the party, dared a small group of us to go explore it. "Scared?" he said, grinning. "Come on, it's just a basement. Probably empty." I hesitated. The scratches on the door looked deliberate, almost like warnings. But I didn't want to be the one left behind, standing in the crowd feeling smaller than I already did. I wanted to belong. I wanted to step forward. Daniel was there, next to me. His hand brushed against mine briefly as he nodded toward the door. "I'll go with you," he said quietly, his voice calm and reassuring. I told myself it made sense. I wanted to believe it. We approached the door. I felt the cold metal of the chain against my fingers. Scratches carved jagged lines across the wood, deep, deliberate, old. I leaned close to inspect them. There was something almost ritualistic about the marks, a rhythm in their chaos. "I've never seen chains like this in a basement," I whispered. Daniel's gaze was steady. "Makes you wonder who's been here before, doesn't it?" I shivered, not from cold, but from a creeping unease. We returned to the party without opening the door. Laughter and music filled the house again, but the basement lingered in my mind. Something about it felt alive, watching, patient. That night, people started disappearing. First Sophie, then Marcus. Their absence wasn't noticed at first. The crowd was large, and noise covered small movements. But when the calls to find them went unanswered, panic started to seep in. I tried to rationalize it. "Maybe they stepped outside," I whispered to Daniel. He didn't answer immediately, just observed, calm, calculating. When we finally ventured upstairs to look, the house seemed to shift around us. Humming appliances, creaking floorboards, distant music from the party downstairs. Every sound exaggerated, echoing, impossible to place. The basement door loomed at the end of the hall. Scratches looked fresher now, chains swinging slightly. I couldn't remember moving them. Daniel knelt beside the door. "You feel it, right?" he asked. "Feel what?" "That someone's been here," he said softly. His hand brushed the door, and I noticed he knew exactly how to touch the scratches, tracing them with an almost intimate precision. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. I wanted to believe he was just curious, just attentive. Then I noticed details he shouldn't have known. He referenced a conversation I had at lunch earlier that day, private. He mentioned the brand of coffee I preferred at the cafe, and the exact song that had been playing in my headphones. He recalled the name of my ex-boyfriend's cat, things I hadn't spoken aloud to anyone. I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted to believe it. The house became oppressive. Shadows pooled in corners. Neon light from outside flickered across the scratched door. The rain outside whispered against the windows, steady, relentless. Every creak of the floorboards felt amplified, every distant voice twisted. People were missing. The party had fractured into tense groups. Some were panicked. Some tried to rationalize. I stayed close to Daniel. He seemed safe, observant, attentive, a lifeline in a night that had grown dangerous without clear reason. Hours passed. The disappearances continued. My heart pounded as we scoured rooms, checking closets, behind furniture. Nothing. Nothing but the sense of being watched, the impossibility of the missing. It was Daniel who noticed the subtle patterns first. The scratches, the chains, the shadows and the reflections of windows. He explained them in a quiet, almost hypnotic voice, pointing out details I hadn't noticed. But then, impossibly, he named where each missing person had been last seen, what they had touched, what they had whispered to each other. Private things, things no outsider could know. I wanted to believe it was intuition. I wanted to believe he was simply perceptive. I told myself it made sense. But then the basement door creaked. Slowly, softly, like it was breathing. Daniel put his hand on my shoulder. "It's okay," he said. "We're here. We'll see." We opened the door. Inside, darkness swallowed the steps. The air was damp, metallic, smelled of rust and dust. Chains clinked softly. Scratches ran down the walls in jagged lines. Footprints that weren't ours marked the floor. And there, at the far end, a shadow moved. Watching, waiting, not human, not entirely, but terrifyingly aware. Daniel stepped forward, calm, collected, but he didn't touch the figure. He simply observed it. He had been watching all along. He had known. The intruder had been living in the house, in secret passages, between walls, in attics and crawl spaces. A voyeur, patient, manipulative. They had observed the guests for weeks, mapping routines, habits, private details. Daniel had known, or maybe he had always been part of it. Panic hit me. My voice shook. "We have to call the police." Daniel's eyes met mine. Cold. Precise. "They know you're afraid. That's what matters. Fear is the currency." I realized too late how isolated I was, how vulnerable, how meticulously my life had been observed, dissected. Every digital trail, every social media post, every private habit had been catalogued. We ran. I don't remember how. The house felt endless, hallways bending, reflections shimmering, the rain outside hiding everything. Police arrived later. Evidence was collected, footprints, fingerprints, surveillance footage from outside the house. The intruder had vanished. No trace inside, no clear identity. Only shadows, only signs of presence, only the psychological spiral left behind in the minds of the guests. I survived, but I am not the same. The basement door still haunts me. The scratches, the chains, the idea of being watched, catalogued, manipulated. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I wonder about the intruder, about the meticulous observation, about the invisible boundaries they crossed, about trust, privacy, identity, safety. We think we know the spaces we inhabit, the people we allow near us. But someone can be inside, unseen, silent, patient, and all our assumptions collapse in their hands. I learned that fear can be collected, measured, stored, that loneliness and vulnerability are invitations, and that even in safety, the memory of being watched can never be erased. I survive, but I am changed, and I will never step near a locked basement again. Story 3. The rain came in sheets that night, cold, relentless. It hammered against the windows of my apartment and tapped a nervous rhythm across the streets outside. Neon from the gas station down the block fractured across wet asphalt, blurred into streaks of red and blue. The city smelled of damp concrete and exhaust, and every footstep echoed like it belonged to someone following me. I was alone. Again. 2 months post-breakup. 2 months in a new city, in a new apartment, trying to rebuild the pieces of myself I thought I had lost forever. The group chat buzzed on my phone. 5 of us, me, Clara, Sophie, Jake, and Nico. We had planned a small party at Clara's loft. The kind of party where everyone knows each other, but not too well. A place where anonymity could be savored in the laughter, in shared bottles of wine, in the fleeting spark of music and movement. I hesitated before texting. I didn't feel ready. My recent breakup had left a hollow ache I hadn't learned to disguise. But the party, I told myself, could be a step. One night to feel normal, to feel alive. The chat exploded with excitement. Gifs, laughing emojis, photos of decorations in progress, bottles lined up on the counter, candles flickering in glass jars. My pulse quickened as I scrolled, feeling the warmth of belonging brush against my isolation. "Are you coming, Elle?" Clara's message pinged. "I'll be there," I typed. Too quickly, like admitting it made it real. By the time I reached Clara's loft, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and mirrored. I walked past fogged windows of closed cafes, the faint smell of roasted coffee drifting out through half-open doors. The neon from a liquor store painted my reflection across the sidewalk. I glanced down at my phone again. The group chat had gone silent. I stepped inside. Music hummed softly, a low jazz track leaking from speakers hidden behind bookshelves. Candles flickered across the room, casting dancing shadows that turned familiar objects into strangers. My heart slowed when I noticed a new face, a guy I hadn't met, standing by the kitchen counter. He smiled at me gently, not the arrogant kind, not the predatory kind, but a calm, observing smile that made me feel like someone was finally noticing me. "Hi," he said. "I'm Liam. Clara said you'd be here." I nodded. My voice caught in my throat. El. Nice to meet you." He gestured toward the couch. "Can I get you a drink?" I followed him instinctively. I didn't know why I trusted him so quickly, why his presence was comforting in a room filled with familiar faces and strangers alike. The night passed in a blur of chatter, clinking glasses, laughter that smelled like warm alcohol and candle wax. I slipped in and out of conversations, half listening, half lost in thought. Liam stayed near me, attentive but subtle. He remembered my drink preference, a joke I had made on my first group video call, a song I hummed under my breath when no one was paying attention. I wanted to believe it. Maybe I was reading too much into it. I told myself it made sense. He was just attentive, maybe empathetic. Maybe it was just me, alone in a new city, craving connection. Then the messages started. It began with a picture. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. A photo of the living room. Our living room. Clara's loft. Taken from a corner behind the sofa. I didn't recognize the angle, but the furniture, the flickering candles, it was real. I showed it to Clara. She frowned. "That's weird. Who sent it?" "No idea," I whispered. And then another. A video moving shaky. Someone walking past the kitchen counter. Liam's calm smile captured in frame. But the angle, impossible. It wasn't a guest. It wasn't me. Someone had been there all along. The group chat exploded with panic. Questions, calls, speculation. "It has to be a prank," Jake said, but his voice trembled. I checked the photo metadata. Nothing. The images had been stripped clean. No EXIF data. No location. Nothing that could tell us how they were taken. The intruder knew our routines. Every toast. Every shared joke. Every step I took across the loft. The messages arrived in real time, synchronized perfectly with what was happening inside. I wanted to rationalize. Maybe a hacker. Maybe someone who lives in the building. Maybe it's a coincidence. But the impossible details piled up. A photo of my purse open, the little notebook I kept in the front pocket. The one I'd shown only Clara. A video of the fridge I had cleaned that afternoon. A clip showing me laughing at a joke I whispered to Liam, so quiet no one else could have heard. I couldn't breathe. I pressed my palms to my face to steady my shaking hands. The loft, the music, the laughter, they became layered with paranoia, suffocating, dense. I tried to focus on Liam. I needed grounding. He leaned closer, whispered my name. Calm, attentive, precise. He didn't just observe. He understood. He mirrored my own gestures. He remembered things I hadn't told anyone. I told myself it made sense. He's kind. He's empathetic. I'm reading too much into it. But then came the whisper. Not in the room, not aloud. Through my phone. A voice note, faint and distorted. "El, we see you. You can't hide." I dropped my phone. My heart leapt. I could feel the walls closing in. The candles flickered like warning lights. I heard the faintest click from the ceiling. I left the loft that night feeling hollow, chased by the shadows of invisible eyes. Rain-slicked streets reflected my own fractured image, and in each puddle, I thought I glimpsed them, shapes moving behind me, watching. For days, I stayed inside. My apartment became a prison of humming appliances, buzzing phones, footsteps that weren't mine. Every notification could be them. Every reflection in a window could be someone observing. I installed cameras, motion sensors. I changed my routines. No coffee shops, no night walks, no late texts. But the intruder adapted. Messages arrived with timestamps matching my movements. Videos showed the inside of my apartment. My keys, my shoes, my favorite mug, my journals. Every intimate detail stolen. I reached out to the police. They tracked IP addresses, looked into burner phones, hacked metadata. Everything led nowhere. No one could trace the origin. No physical evidence, just the images, the videos, the timing. And then came the revelation. Liam wasn't a stranger. He wasn't even fully real. One of Clara's old college friends had created multiple online personas, infiltrating group chats, attending parties, planting hidden cameras and decorations, in smoke detectors, in vases. He knew our lives, our schedules, our secrets, down to the minute. Every intimate gesture, every whispered joke, every sip of wine, recorded, watched, catalogued. The confrontation came quietly. The intruder, an older man, unassuming, friendly in appearance, was arrested at his apartment, surrounded by monitors showing feeds from dozens of homes, party after party, all meticulously observed. He smiled at the officers, calm, manipulative, in control. I survived, but I carry the memory of being seen without consent, of being watched when I thought I was alone. I carry the feeling of invisible hands mapping my life, of technology bending intimacy into invasion. Even now, reflections feel fragile. Puddles on city streets, mirrored windows, glossy table surfaces, they all carry the potential for observation. The hum of appliances feels sharper. Phone buzzes feel loaded. Footsteps behind me make my skin prickle. Trust is no longer simple. Privacy is never guaranteed. Obsession doesn't need proximity. It only needs opportunity. And I've learned that survival isn't just about escaping. It's about reclaiming yourself, fragment by fragment, in a world that wants to look at you without being seen. Story 4. It started on a Thursday evening, the kind of night where rain slides down windows in uneven sheets, pooling on the asphalt like liquid mirrors. The city smelled of wet concrete, fried food from late-night carts, and something faintly metallic I couldn't place. I was walking back from campus, backpack slung over one shoulder, hoodie soaked, teeth chattering a little from the cold that had nothing to do with weather. My name is Claire. I'm 21, in my final year of college, living alone in a small studio apartment I could barely afford. Life had been quiet for months, almost painfully so. Since my breakup, the apartment had become a shrine to routine and isolation. Textbooks stacked unevenly on the dresser, empty coffee mugs on the counter, a calendar with my assignments and deadlines scribbled in neat columns. I liked the order, liked the predictability, liked feeling safe in a way that wasn't real. The Uber app buzzed just as I reached the corner of my street. The meter for my ride showed $0. I slid into the back seat, dripping and shivering, and the driver nodded without a word. "Long day?" he asked after a moment. His voice was low, calm, almost comforting. "Yeah," I muttered, shrugging. "Lots of classes, and then work." He didn't press further, just drove. The streets were slick with rain, neon lights reflecting off puddles, fragmenting the city into endless shapes. Jazz music played softly from a distant bar, drifting faintly through the fog and traffic. I glanced at the meter. It ticked up slowly, reasonable, normal, and then we stopped. I looked up. We were outside my apartment building. The engine was off. Streetlights flickered against wet bricks. The hum of traffic seemed distant, like it had retreated to another world. I reached for my purse. The meter kept running. I frowned. The car isn't moving. The driver's eyes met mine briefly in the mirror. Calm, observant. "It's fine," he said. "Sometimes the app keeps counting until the trip is officially ended." I nodded, though my stomach sank. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. I told myself it made sense. But then, over the next few days, the pattern repeated. The meter ran even when the car was parked at red lights. Even when we stopped at a drive-thru or a friend's apartment. And the strange part, almost imperceptible at first, was that each increment seemed to correspond to moments in my life. Small, subtle, unsettling. The time the meter jumped sharply was when my apartment alarm had buzzed, or when my phone lit up with an unexpected notification. A minor accident on campus, a shadow in the hallway of my building. I tried to rationalize it. Random coincidence. My mind playing tricks. Exhaustion. I wanted to believe it. Then I met Evan. He appeared in the library one rainy afternoon, leaning over the same stack of books I was examining, umbrella dripping, eyes calm and attentive. He asked about the book I'd picked, then remembered a note I'd scribbled in a margin 2 semesters ago, something I'd thought no one would see. His memory was uncanny, almost unnerving, but he seemed safe, attentive, familiar, human. For the first time in months, I felt the tight coil of loneliness in my chest loosen slightly. We started meeting for coffee. Small cafes near campus, dimly lit, the hum of conversation and espresso machines surrounding us like a protective bubble. He listened when I talked about my breakup, my isolation, my sense of displacement. He didn't judge, didn't push, just absorbed. And sometimes, late at night, I'd catch him sending me a text that made me laugh at something only I would notice. A lyric I hummed while walking to class, a joke about a misprinted syllabus. I told myself it was normal. It was human, safe. But then came the impossible details. He knew my favorite corner in the library, the exact way I folded my hoodie, the times I would linger by the vending machine. Small habits no one could know unless they were watching. The first time I realized it, my stomach went cold. I wanted to believe it made sense. Maybe he just paid attention. Maybe I was overthinking. Then the Uber ride started again. One night, soaked from rain, I slipped into the car and noticed immediately. The meter had already started counting. Before the car even moved, I glanced back instinctively. The driver's eyes met mine in the mirror, calm, intelligent. He said nothing, but the way he watched me felt layered, observant, calculated. The meter jumped with a chime, and a notification buzzed on my phone. A low battery alert, though my phone was fully charged. Minutes later, a soft knock at my apartment door. I hadn't ordered food. No one was supposed to be there. I hesitated. The meter ticked up again. I told myself it was coincidence. The small patterns grew. Emails arriving minutes after certain meter increments. Random social media notifications aligning with the ride. Every time I left the apartment, the Uber app seemed to anticipate my steps. Routes that didn't exist, waiting cars that weren't there, the meter running when the car was parked at odd locations. I wanted to believe it was just a glitch. I started noticing shadows and reflections. Footsteps that didn't match anyone else in the building. My apartment door would click as if someone had tested it, though I checked it meticulously every time. Evan was the only person I confided in. His presence felt grounding. He listened to the small details, the flickers in the Uber app, the meter, the notifications. And he didn't make me feel paranoid. At least, not in a dismissive way. He asked calm, probing questions, sometimes hinting at things I hadn't noticed. "You've been careful, haven't you? Even the little things?" I nodded. I told myself I was overthinking, and then the voice notes started. Short, clipped, artificial-sounding recordings. My name whispered. Not through the phone, not digitally distorted, but precise, layered with audio metadata that suggested someone was listening as I moved. The pattern was clear. Every time the meter increment, an event followed, minor at first, then more pronounced. A friend calling to cancel plans at the exact second the meter jumped. A water leak in my apartment timed perfectly with another increment. My coffee spilling over my notes. Each event mirrored the increments almost too perfectly. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. I called Uber support. They confirmed my account had been accessed from a device that was not mine. The driver had been following a simulated route generated from a hacked GPS overlay. Someone was manipulating the app in real time, feeding the driver coordinates, using the meter as a trigger for some larger purpose. I told myself it made sense, but it didn't. The realization hit me slowly, creeping like fog over wet pavement. My fear was being controlled. The increments weren't random, they were orchestrated. The accidents, the coincidences, the notifications, they were deliberately aligned to the meter. Someone was watching, measuring, feeding the data, controlling my emotional response in real time. The next Uber ride, I refused to sit in the back. I sat up front, eyes fixed on the driver, hands clenched on the seat. He smiled slightly in the mirror, calm, collected, and intelligent. He said, "You're cautious." I like that. I wanted to believe he meant observation as harmless. I wanted to trust him, but when the meter jumped mid-ride, my apartment lights flickered as if someone had manipulated them. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan appeared. "Are you okay? I was just thinking about you." I froze. The timing, the knowledge. How could he have known I was about to check the lights? I called the police. They traced the hacked account, the GPS overlay, the burner phones. The driver's identity was a fabrication. Multiple victims, multiple accounts, multiple identities. Evan confronted me one night in the quiet of a late cafe. Calm, composed, speaking softly. "I wanted to help you understand. I didn't want to scare you, but the observation, it's been ongoing." I realized then that his attentiveness, his knowledge of my routines, even his comfort, had been manipulated. The hacker had constructed an illusion of safety while controlling the narrative, guiding my emotions, orchestrating fear and relief in carefully timed sequences. The police eventually caught the operator, a digital predator using stolen accounts and AI-generated voice notes to manipulate multiple targets. Evidence was collected, warnings issued, systems patched. I was safe, technically, but I was not the same. Even now, when I ride a rideshare, I check the meter constantly. Shadows and reflections make me flinch. Every buzz on my phone, every unexpected notification, triggers a spike in awareness. My apartment doors click closed with a ritualistic tension. I notice every sound, the hum of appliances, distant footsteps, floor creaks, the subtle rhythm of life in the city. And I think about control, about trust, about privacy, about the fragility of what we assume is safe. Sometimes I sit by the window at night, watching neon reflections blur in puddles, rain tapping softly, jazz drifting through the fog, and I remember the meter. The silent, unrelenting meter that measured fear. That measured me. That measured life in increments. And I know one thing for certain. Someone can manipulate your world, your routines, your sense of reality, without ever entering your apartment, without ever touching you. They can simply feed on the patterns of your life and wait. You can survive it. You can get away. But you will never again assume the world is uncontrollable. You will never trust the numbers, the notifications, the quiet moments, the driver who seems kind. You will always notice. And maybe that is the only protection you have left. Story 5. I remember stepping out into the rain that night, the kind that fell in thin sheets, blurring streetlights into watercolor streaks across the wet pavement. My coat was soaked through before I reached the cab, and the city smelled of asphalt, wet leaves, and the faint tang of roasting coffee from a corner cafe. I had moved here 2 months ago, trying to escape the wreckage of my last relationship. Divorce papers still folded in my pocket, bruises to my trust, and my routine lingering in the small, quiet apartment I now called home. I didn't know many people here. Halloween parties were my chance to vanish for a night into someone else's world, to breathe among strangers, and maybe, just maybe, feel alive again. The building was tall, modern, the windows casting a soft glow onto the rain-slicked street. Music leaked through the front door, muted bass, laughter, the occasional clink of glass. Costumes crowded the lobby, a pirate, a vampire, someone in a full fox suit whose eyes were impossibly bright. I let the doorman scan my invitation, muttering a polite hello, and walked into the foyer. That's when I noticed him, or rather them. A person at the far end of the room. Costume elaborate, hyper-realistic. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. A makeup job too good. A mask that somehow captured every nuance of a face I knew, or had once known. The hair, the smile, the tilt of the head, it mirrored mine. I froze. The room continued around me, but I only saw them. My own features, twisted into a stranger's guise. I wanted to laugh. Maybe it was a trick of the lighting. Maybe I was still fragile from the breakup, vulnerable, imagining. But my pulse caught and my stomach sank. That's when Daniel appeared. He had been at the party all along, or maybe he appeared from nowhere. It didn't matter. His presence felt like a tether. Warm, attentive, subtly attuned to the tremor in my hands, the faint tremor in my voice. "You look tense," he said, calm. Not intrusive. Observant. I'm fine," I said, forcing a laugh. My eyes flicked to the figure across the room. He followed my gaze. Ah, that's unsettling. He moved closer, deliberately, carefully, without closing the distance too much. But maybe not what you think. I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. We drifted through the crowd, talking softly. His voice was measured, quiet, layered with attention. He knew my favorite cocktail, without me saying a word. He recalled a song I had played earlier that week, a song I had shared only with a handful of people. He mentioned a bookstore I liked on a side street, the small coffee shop I walked past each morning, even the nickname a friend had used for me, something that had almost slipped from my memory. I told myself I was imagining patterns where there were none. I wanted to rationalize it. I wanted to trust him. But the unease grew. Later, the host dared a small group, including me, to explore the basement. It was a tradition, he said, a kind of thrill. The door was old, chains loosely draped over the handle, scratches scored into the wood. The air around it smelled faintly of damp and something metallic, like iron or rust. Daniel followed, calm, reassuring. He placed a hand briefly on my shoulder, grounding me. I told myself it made sense. He was just being protective, attentive, human. The basement stairs creaked beneath our feet. Shadows pooled along the walls. Cobwebs trembled in the corner where a single bulb swayed, casting a weak, flickering light. Inside, there were signs. Tiny footprints not ours. Objects moved slightly from where they had been. Scratches along the railing deepened, fresh and deliberate. I felt my stomach tighten. This doesn't feel right, I whispered. Daniel's calm presence only amplified my unease. Sometimes it's not what's there, but what's watching, he said. I wanted to rationalize. It's an old house. Maybe the wind. Maybe nothing. We returned to the party. The room had changed while we were gone. People were quieter. Whispers lingered in the corners. Someone was missing. First it was Sophie, then Marcus. Panic began to ripple. Phones buzzed with texts that didn't make sense. Social media accounts tagged in photos we hadn't taken. Messages with our own words, twisted, altered. Daniel's eyes followed me across the room. Calm, attentive, comforting. But I realized he knew things he shouldn't. My routine. My habits. Names I'd barely mentioned aloud. Details of my apartment, my work, my past. I wanted to believe it was intuition. Observant curiosity. He was charming, intelligent. He had seemed safe. I told myself it made sense. But then I noticed, the figure from earlier, the mirror of my own face, moving independently among the guests. Laughing, gesturing, mimicking. Daniel leaned close. It's fascinating, isn't it? How people reveal themselves, without knowing someone is watching. I stepped back. You know about them? He smiled faintly. I know many things. I watch. I notice. I catalog. It's how I understand people. I swallowed hard. My pulse raced. The basement, the scratches, the chains. This night had been layered with observation, with calculated attention. Every word, every movement, every glance had been watched. I felt the room tilt. Shadows shifted in impossible ways. Music became distorted, bass trembling in my chest. Footsteps echoed where no one walked. Phones buzzed with notifications I hadn't seen. Emails, voice notes, accounts I didn't remember opening. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But Daniel stayed near, calm, a tether of safety and threat intertwined. He knew what I feared. He knew what I held private. The other guests began to disappear one by one. Each absence was quiet, subtle. A laugh cut off mid-sentence. A hand dropped from a conversation. A coat left in the hall. I realized the truth. The impersonator had been observing us all for weeks, crafting masks, rehearsing mannerisms, collecting voices, movements, habits. And Daniel, whether ally or part of the plan, I couldn't tell, knew. By the time we confronted the basement, the intruder was gone. No one knew where or how, or if the missing would return. Phones had vanished. Digital traces erased. The house had swallowed them, leaving only fear in its echo. Police arrived eventually. They found evidence, masks, recordings, footprints, digital metadata, but nothing conclusive. The intruder had vanished, leaving the party fractured, our trust shattered. I went home in the early hours, rain still streaking the city, the neon reflections running into puddles like memories that refused to settle. My apartment smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old coffee, the hum of my fridge louder than normal. I lay awake, tracing the shapes of shadows on the ceiling. I survived, but I am not the same. I learned how fragile trust is, how privacy is an illusion, how someone can observe every detail, manipulate every perception, and vanish, leaving only the spiral of fear in their wake. Even now, when I walk past mirrors, I check my reflection twice. When my phone buzzes at night, I hesitate before opening it. The memory of that Halloween, the mirrors, the masks, the basement, the watching eyes, lingers like fog, shifting, impossible to clear. The lesson is quiet, harsh. Attention can be intimacy, and intimacy can be predation. Boundaries are fragile. Observation can be weaponized. Identity can be stolen before you even know it. I survive, but I am changed. And sometimes, when the wind rattles a window and distant music hums through an empty street, I wonder if the costume still waits, somewhere perfectly mimicking, patiently observing, calculating the next step. Story 6. Have you ever been at a party and felt something shift, like the air itself was paying attention to you? Like the music wasn't just music, but a living thing, attuned to every thought, every fear, every secret you'd tried to hide? That's what happened to me, and I'll never forget it. I'm Lila. I was 25 at the time, recently moved to a new city after a relationship that ended with more bruises to my heart than I wanted to admit. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and rain, silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I spent most nights scrolling through social media, trying to convince myself the world was still normal. I told myself I was rebuilding, but I was fragile, vulnerable. It was the kind of night that invited escape. Rain hammered the streets, bouncing off asphalt in glistening sheets. Neon from a nearby diner reflected across the puddles, fractured and bright. The air smelled sharp, wet, metallic. I had been invited to a rave-style house party by a friend from work, and I told myself it was just a chance to laugh, to feel normal for a few hours. The apartment was packed when I arrived. Strobe lights flashed against the walls, illuminating faces and bottles in harsh bursts of color. Music vibrated through the floorboards, deep and throbbing, a bass line that made your chest ache. I smiled politely at my friend, adjusting my jacket, trying to let the chaos wash over me. And then the DJ played the track. It started innocuously, a steady beat that fit with the rest of the playlist. But there was something wrong, a texture to the sound that made the hair on my arms prickle. The bass line seemed familiar, intimate, like it was tugging at something in my memory. And then I heard it, the whispering. "Lila, you shouldn't have left your coffee mug on the counter." I froze. My pulse spiked. I looked around. Everyone else was dancing, oblivious. My heart thumped so loudly I was sure the neighbors could hear. I laughed nervously. "It's just the echo," I whispered to myself. "Maybe the bass is weird." But the whispers didn't stop. They grew clearer, more personal. Small things only I knew. My favorite cafe latte. The bridge I crossed every morning. The playlist I listened to when I couldn't sleep. I glanced around the room. That's when I noticed him. A man, leaning casually against the wall near the DJ booth. Dark hoodie. Calm. Observant. Eyes scanning the crowd, but he kept glancing at me. There was no recognition, no greeting. Just watchfulness. I tried to rationalize. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Maybe he had noticed me at the cafe. Maybe it was some odd sound mix. Maybe I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. And then the lyrics began. They weren't words from the original track. They were voices, layered under the music, calm, precise, calling out secrets, fears, things I'd only ever whispered in the dark of my apartment. "You think no one sees you when you walk home alone," the voice said. "But I do." I stumbled back, heart hammering. My hands shook. My friend nudged me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, too terrified to speak. I wanted to move to the edge of the room, but the crowd kept me contained. The whispers shifted, moving like shadows through the music, targeting others. One by one, friends glanced nervously at each other. One girl, Jenna, nearly dropped her drink when the voice referenced her fear of elevators, her trembling during the last storm. "This is a prank, right?" I whispered, gripping my coat tighter. The man by the DJ booth smiled faintly. Calm, intelligent, observant. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. I understood. He had orchestrated this. Weeks later, I learned how. He had been gathering data meticulously. Social media posts, public videos, voice notes, photos. Surveillance footage from streets and cafes. Metadata from files we thought private. He had used the music as a vessel, a trap. A psychological net that let him study reactions, test boundaries, observe fear in real time. I wanted to believe he was harmless. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he was just clever. Maybe it was art. I told myself it made sense. But when the whispers became directed, naming details about my life no stranger could know, rationalizations died. I spent the rest of the night on edge, scanning the room, tracing every reflection, every shadow. The music was relentless, deep in my chest, vibrating through my bones. My eyes darted to the man repeatedly. Calm, precise, waiting, watching. Eventually, someone called the police. But the evidence was layered, fragmented. Files from multiple sources, burner accounts, AI voice cloning. He had constructed a digital labyrinth around us, one that obscured direct access to his identity. By the time the investigation caught a thread of his network, he had vanished, leaving only the track behind. I survived, but I wasn't the same. Nights feel different now. The hum of electronics, the drip of rain, neon reflections in puddles. I see patterns everywhere. I double-check locks, avoid certain apps, distrust digital systems that I once relied on without thought. Sometimes, when music plays in the background, when a song starts in a bar or a friend's apartment, I swear I can hear it, just beneath the melody. Whispering secrets only I know. Waiting for someone who is still out there, patient, observing, calculating. The party taught me something about vulnerability. About how easily a life can be mapped, dissected, and manipulated without your consent. And how someone doesn't need to enter your home to know everything about you. Even now, years later, when I walk past a cafe or scroll through my social feeds, I remember the whispers, the way the bass line seemed to track me, the calm, empty eyes of the man behind the DJ booth. Sometimes, the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. That someone doesn't need a reason. They just need observation, patience, and a method. If your gut tells you something is wrong, listen. It might be the only thing keeping you alive. Story 7. I remember the moment I saw it. The envelope, cream-colored, thick cardstock, no return address. Just my name, scrawled in elegant script that felt both familiar and impossibly precise. It was slipped under my door in the quiet of my apartment. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint drone of distant traffic through the window, and the low thrum of the radiator filling the space around me. Outside, rain tapped against the glass, each droplet a soft, insistent drumbeat. I hesitated before picking it up. My fingers trembled slightly, partly from the chill, partly from the sense that something about this night was already wrong. I'd moved here 3 months ago, escaping the wreckage of a long-term relationship that had left me raw and hesitant. Friends were few. I was learning how to occupy my own skin again, to trust the rhythm of normal life. The envelope was heavy in my hand. Inside, a single card, an invitation to a party. But it wasn't ordinary, not in the slightest. It mentioned details no stranger could have known. My favorite cafe near the corner of 5th and Pine, where I always ordered a flat white. A memory of my ex laughing at a terrible joke I'd told years ago, something I'd never even mentioned in casual conversation. A nickname only my college roommate had used. It was precise, intimate, and terrifying. I stared at it, heart hammering. Who would know this? I whispered to myself. My apartment was silent, the low hum of the fridge punctuated by the occasional footstep from above. I told myself it could be a prank, maybe a friend, but the accuracy too exact. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Asterisk. I hope you can make it tonight. I've prepared everything just for you. Asterisk. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was some immersive art experience. Maybe someone had gone through my public posts, my tagged photos, pieced together memories. I wanted to believe it made sense. I wanted to believe I wasn't being watched. I told my friend Mara, who had been helping me settle in. She read the card, her eyebrows knitting in concern. Ellie, this isn't normal. But maybe it's just someone trying to impress you? Or make the party feel special? I nodded, wanting to trust her. I wanted to believe it. The rain had picked up by the time we left. Neon signs from the shops reflected in puddles along the street. Street lights shimmered through the mist. I hugged my coat tighter and walked quickly, Mara beside me, her hand brushing mine occasionally. There was something comforting in her presence, a reminder that not all eyes were watching, not all attention was invasive. The house was large, modern but unassuming, set back from the street behind a small wrought iron gate. As we approached, I noticed small details that made my chest tighten. The doormat read, "Welcome, Ellie," in neat, handwritten letters. Inside, the air was warm, heavy with incense and faint perfume. Music drifted through the rooms, soft jazz, distant and distorted, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. People milled about, masks and costumes elaborate, almost cinematic. I tried to focus on the crowd, the chatter, the ambient clink of glasses, the laughter. And then I saw him, Daniel. He stood near the corner, dressed simply, quietly observing. Calm eyes, a faint smile, attentive in a way that made me lean instinctively toward him. He greeted me with the kind of warmth that felt safe, intimate, knowing without being intrusive. "You look tense," he said softly, voice low, almost hypnotic. I'm fine," I murmured, though my hands betrayed me, fidgeting with the strap of my bag. He smiled, just a little, perceptively. "I can tell you're cautious. Understandable. But you're safe here with me." I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. He was charming, perceptive, attentive, but not threatening. As the night stretched on, small, impossible details began to emerge. Daniel knew my routine. The coffee I bought every morning, the street I took to avoid construction, the playlist I'd left on shuffle at home. He recalled an old nickname from college, a song I hadn't shared publicly in years. I told myself I was overthinking. I rationalized. Maybe he had noticed my social media carefully. Maybe he had mutual contacts who mentioned details. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. Then came the first game. The host, energetic, challenged us to a scavenger hunt through the house. It was playful, but something in the way Daniel led me toward the rooms made me uneasy. He knew exactly where to take me, knew the path I would follow, the turns I would make. Inside the study, I found a notebook on the desk. I opened it cautiously. Names, dates, details. Observations about people I knew. Memories I hadn't shared aloud. Photos I'd posted online. A small, meticulous record of all of us at this party, before we even arrived. I swallowed. The house suddenly felt too quiet. Appliances hummed in the background, but every sound seemed magnified. The floorboards creaking as someone moved, distant sirens outside, the faint buzz of a phone left on a table. "Daniel, did you see this?" I whispered, pointing to the notebook. He leaned close, voice calm, almost soothing. "I see a lot of things," he said. "You should feel seen. It's comforting, isn't it?" I wanted to believe it. I wanted to rationalize. I told myself it made sense, but my instincts screamed otherwise. By the time we returned to the living room, the party had changed. People were quieter, more tense. Conversations cut off abruptly. Someone was missing. Then another. I checked my phone, messages from friends, calls I hadn't made, notifications from social media accounts I didn't recognize. Each one contained details only someone who had been monitoring us could know. Locations, personal habits, conversations we'd had weeks ago. Daniel's gaze was steady, observant, comforting, but I realized he knew things he shouldn't. Every time I moved, he seemed to anticipate it, to mirror my behavior, to reflect the smallest nuance. I tried to leave. The door was at the far end of the hallway, but the layout seemed to have shifted. Music from the next room echoed through the walls, distorted. Footsteps sounded where no one walked. Shadows pooled unnaturally. Daniel stepped close. "You're frightened," he said. "That's good. Fear reveals what we hide. Fear is honest." I wanted to push him away, to scream, to run. But the air was thick, heavy with anticipation. Every detail of my life, my routines, my history, had been observed, catalogued, twisted into a controlled narrative. The missing guests returned hours later, confused but unharmed. The police arrived, having been called after someone found a discarded envelope outside the house. They found evidence, tracking, surveillance cameras, metadata on social media. But Daniel, the orchestrator, was gone. No address, no account, no digital trace. Only the meticulous manipulation he had left behind. I walked home in the rain, neon lights smeared across puddles, the distant hum of the city pressing in on me. My apartment was quiet, appliances humming softly, the smell of cold coffee and detergent clinging to the air. I survived, but I am not the same. I learned how fragile trust can be, how vulnerable privacy is, how someone can observe, manipulate, and disappear before you even know what is real. Even now, I check doors twice, hesitate before opening apps, and pause whenever someone seems too attentive. The lesson is subtle, but sharp. Attention can be intimacy, and intimacy can be predation. Boundaries are fragile. Identity can be stolen silently, meticulously, without warning. I survive, but I am changed. And sometimes, when the wind rattles my window or my phone buzzes with an unknown number, I wonder if the orchestrator is still out there, watching, cataloging, waiting for the next narrative to control. Story 8. The heat hit me first. Thick, wet, almost sticky. It clung to my skin the second I stepped onto Clara's backyard. The sun was past its peak, the sky smeared with streaks of orange and lavender, but the concrete still radiated warmth. Music floated across the yard, soft, distant, a mix of indie pop and low bass, and somewhere, a speaker by the pool hummed like it had a heartbeat. I wasn't ready for this. Not really. I had moved to this town 2 months ago, leaving behind an apartment that still smelled faintly of my ex, the curtains closed, the city outside quiet but oppressive. The breakup had hollowed me out. Days bled together in gray, lonely monotony. My phone buzzed with muted notifications I didn't open, messages I didn't answer. Yet here I was, at Clara's invitation, walking past lounge chairs and half-empty cups, the smell of sunscreen and chlorine thick in the air. I had told myself I wanted normalcy. I told myself I could handle it. Clara waved from the edge of the pool. Her hair wet, pulled back in a loose braid, a sun-faded swimsuit clinging to her like it had always been part of her. "Elle, over here." I forced a smile, nodding, stepping closer. She introduced me to a few people. Familiar names from work, social media, mutual friends. And then him. I can't explain why my chest eased when I saw him. Calm, attentive, observant without prying. Someone who seemed to notice details without demanding explanation. His name was Rowan. Short, polite laughter. Eyes that lingered just enough. Not the predatory kind, but present. Solid in a way I hadn't realized I craved. "You look like you need a drink," he said, offering a glass of sparkling water. "Thanks," I murmured. My fingers brushed against his, just slightly, and I felt something I hadn't in months, a sense of being seen. The party unfolded lazily. Guests slipped in and out of the pool, laughter punctuating the music, the occasional splash. The sun slid lower, the sky dimming into violet, reflections shimmering on the water. And then I noticed it. My reflection, perfectly still in the rippling pool, moved wrong. I froze. The surface mirrored me, but my smile lagged behind mine. My hand rose a second too late. A shadow twisted where there shouldn't have been one. I blinked. The water settled. Normal again. I shook my head. It's the light. It's my imagination. I've been cooped up too long. Rowan noticed. "You okay?" he asked, voice calm. Observant. "Yes," I said quickly, forcing myself to smile. "Just dizzy from the sun." He didn't press, just nodded. That calm, intelligent patience, watchful without crowding, made me want to believe him. I wanted to believe him. The whispers started subtly, beneath the pool's surface, faint and low. I told myself it was the wind, the water flowing over tiles, the murmurs of people laughing. I wanted it to be nothing, but then the reflection shifted again. A figure emerged, not in the pool, not on the deck, just in the water, watching, smiling. I gasped. Rowan's hand brushed mine. "Hey, easy," he said, steadying me. The warmth of his hand anchored me, and I told myself it made sense. Maybe it was the sunlight, the angle. Maybe I was overthinking. The evening stretched. Drinks, music, conversations with laughter that felt too hollow, too forced. The reflections in the pool began to diverge more clearly. A friend leaning over to fill a cup, their mirrored hand lingered in the water for a fraction longer. Eyes that weren't looking at anyone, lips moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. I tried rationalizing. It's a trick of light. Shadows. The water's surface. I'm imagining it. But Rowan noticed, too. Quietly. He leaned close, whispering, "You notice it too, right?" "Yes," I breathed, almost ashamed. He nodded. "I've seen it before. Some people, they're sensitive to it. Water reflects more than light." I wanted to believe him. I needed to. His calm presence made the chaos in my head feel manageable. I told myself it made sense, but the images grew more impossible. My journal, left open on a chaise lounge, reflected in the water, but the pages were moving. Handwriting appearing I hadn't written. Notes about me, private thoughts, dates I hadn't shared with anyone. I started watching the pool instead of the party. Every shimmer, every ripple. The whispers grew clearer. Names. Memories. My ex's nickname. My favorite song playing softly in the background. How had they known? I tried to reason. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe someone had hacked my accounts, accessed my emails, my social media, my cloud storage. Maybe it was a prank. But the timing, the precision, the intruder knew exactly when I'd step onto the deck, when I'd laugh, when I'd reach for a drink. Every reflection, every ripple, every distorted smile aligned with my movements. Rowan stayed near, calm, observant, attentive, and now I noticed he knew things too. Not just the trivial, my routines, the way I arrange my books, my coffee order in the mornings, a note I kept hidden in my bag. I told myself it made sense. He was a good observer, attentive, caring. I wanted to believe it. I didn't see him place the decorations, the small floating candles, the speaker that hummed just below the waterline. I didn't see the faint glimmer of lenses embedded in glass, in ceramic, in the pool tiles. By nightfall, the pool became a mirror of paranoia. Movements lagged, faces twisted, whispers grew into partial words. Watch, remember. I stumbled back, gripping the deck railing, nausea rising. Rowan's hand steadied me again. "Hey, listen. It's okay. Don't let it overwhelm you." But it wasn't okay. Not really. Not when the whispers were synchronized perfectly with my every movement. Not when my friends began murmuring about seeing the same things. Not when the reflection of my own smile warped into something I didn't recognize. The intruder escalated. Messages arrived on phones from anonymous numbers, photos of the pool, of the deck, of me reaching for a glass. Videos with timestamps matching every second. The calm chaos of the party became a detailed map for someone else. I tried calling the police. They came, checked devices. The cameras were hidden cleverly, streaming wirelessly. Metadata stripped, emails anonymized, social media accounts fake. They couldn't trace a physical intruder. It was meticulous, calculated, invasive. Weeks later, Rowan revealed the truth, quietly, carefully, almost clinically. A friend of Clara's, obsessed, manipulative, using technology, chemicals, and observation to control perception, to bend reality. The pool, the decorations, the small adjustments in lighting, all designed to make us doubt what we saw, to immerse us in hallucinations, to observe without ever being seen. The confrontation was subdued. Police confiscated devices, cameras, chemicals. Clara's friend admitted to multiple incidents. The precision, the knowledge, the psychological manipulation. It was terrifying in its logic. I survived. I left the city shortly after. But the water, the reflections, the whispers, they stayed in my mind. Every mirror now holds a question. Every pool a warning. Every shimmer of movement feels like eyes watching. Trust is fragile. Privacy is illusionary. Memory can be invaded. Survival is not just leaving a place. It's reclaiming the certainty of your own mind. I still avoid parties near water. I watch reflections carefully. I know that people can manipulate perception, that technology can observe, record, and distort in ways that leave scars deeper than any wound. And sometimes, when I see ripples in a puddle on a neon-lit street, I remember the pool, the whispers, the distorted smiles. I remember that even when the water seems calm, someone somewhere could be watching. And the hardest part, knowing that survival doesn't erase the fear. It only teaches you how to move through the world differently. Because reflections lie. And sometimes the lie is deliberate. Story 9. The invitation arrived in the kind of font you only see on social media posts meant to feel exclusive. Cursive, gold-edged, embossed against dark paper. Tonight, only those invited. 9 p.m. 17 Fairfax Lane. I stared at it for a long time in the silence of my apartment, rain tapping against the window, the hum of my refrigerator in the background, the faint jazz from the cafe below drifting up in distorted notes. The city had that wet, reflective sheen, neon bouncing off puddles like fractured glass. I had been alone for weeks, recent breakup, my apartment still smelling faintly of him, a slow burn of loneliness I tried to ignore. But something about the invitation felt possible, like a lifeline tossed into the fog. I wanted to believe it. My roommate had shrugged. It's probably a rich kid thing. Flashy house, free booze. Don't get your hopes up. But I was craving distraction, human warmth, the illusion of belonging. So I went. The street was narrow, slick with rain, mist curling along the gutters like smoke. When I arrived, the house loomed, Victorian, sprawling, windows lit in warm yellows and ambers, shadows stretching across manicured lawns. A gate swung open silently as I approached. The doorman, or maybe just a tall man in a tailored coat, nodded once, unreadable. Inside, music pulsed softly through grand halls. Slow electronic basses layered over jazz, occasional laughter echoing like distant bells. Velvet drapes, gold chandeliers, reflections of people in mirrored walls. I took a deep breath. The scent of polished wood, wet coats, perfume, and something faintly metallic made my stomach twist. I wandered toward the bar, and there he was. Alex. He was sitting in a corner, head tilted slightly, phone in hand, but looking at me as if he'd been expecting me. Not in a creepy way, but calm, attentive, a presence that seemed to fill the space. "You're Claire," he said softly, no preamble. "I remember your favorite coffee from the cafe on 14th, vanilla skim." I froze. Yeah, how did? "Just an observation," he said with a small, disarming smile. "You seem careful, thoughtful." I wanted to believe it. I told myself he was just perceptive, that my routines had been obvious, that I was imagining him knowing more than he could. The party unfolded around us. Glasses clinked, conversations drifted in low hums, footsteps on polished wood, rain tapping the windows behind heavy curtains. I moved through rooms with strangers who seemed impossibly confident, smiles that didn't reach eyes. Yet Alex was always a few steps behind, attentive, listening, adjusting. Protective. Safe. By midnight, the rain had thickened into a drizzle that misted the exterior windows, and I decided it was time to leave. I walked toward the front doors. Locked. I blinked, then glanced at the side doors. Locked. Gates, high wrought iron locked. "Maybe it's a joke?" I whispered to Alex, who was calmly beside me. "No joke," he said. Voice low, precise, oddly intimate. "The host is meticulous." My phone buzzed. No signal. Nothing. Just a blank screen, though I knew it should have bars. The first seed of unease hit me. This was intentional. We tried doors, windows. Nothing gave. Panic was slow at first, a creeping awareness that we were trapped, observed. Every corridor, every hallway seemed longer than it should be. Music from rooms behind closed doors reverberated oddly, the bass and laughter echoing into shadows. Floorboards creaked under my steps. I heard whispers, maybe my imagination. Alex stayed with me, calm, observant. I clung to that, wanted to believe it. I told myself he made sense, but impossible details began surfacing. He knew what I had eaten for lunch that day. He mentioned an old nickname I hadn't used in years. He hummed a song that I only ever played in my apartment at night when no one else could hear. I told myself it made sense. Maybe he had overheard it somewhere. Maybe I was overthinking. The party continued in a distorted rhythm. Drinks, laughter, soft conversations in mirrored rooms. Occasionally, I'd see guests glance toward corners or corridors as if something unseen held attention. I couldn't shake the sense of surveillance, but rationalized it. Cameras, phones, security. Normal. I moved through rooms and noticed subtle invasions. A jacket I'd hung on a rack slightly shifted. My purse on a side table, zipper half open. Tiny scratches on a polished surface that hadn't been there moments ago. Alex noticed my eyes narrowing. "They're careful," he said softly, "but not infallible. Nothing truly is." I wanted to believe it. I told myself I made sense. Hours passed. The music became slower, more distorted, shadows pooling in corners. Guests began whispering among themselves, tense, murmuring that they couldn't reach anyone outside, that the gates wouldn't open. Phones remained dead. Panic was creeping in, subtle at first, then pressing. Every reflection seemed like a camera lens. Every creak a measured step. Every distant laugh a signal. I tried to leave again. All doors and gates still locked. Windows impossibly reinforced. Alex stayed calm, observant, manipulative without malice, but his attentiveness was unsettling. The first direct hint of the host arrived, a recorded voice echoing through the hall. Calm, slow, familiar. "Welcome. You've arrived, and you'll remain until the experience is complete." Guests froze. Some laughed nervously. I didn't. That night spiraled into a psychological labyrinth. Every decision, every attempt to leave, every glance behind was monitored. We realized slowly that we were being recorded. Every action, every expression, every whispered conversation. Screens hidden in mirrors, lenses in chandeliers, cameras in corners behind drapes. Alex helped me navigate, guided me, softly observed. I trusted him. I told myself it was fine, until the impossible details began to suffocate me. He knew my routines, which drinks I preferred, how I tilted my head when thinking, how I avoided eye contact in moments of unease. He anticipated my fear, predicted my movements. The host's surveillance wasn't just for entertainment, it was controlling me. I wanted to believe it was chance. I told myself I was overthinking. The spiral continued. Psychological manipulation, small torments, anxiety tests, isolation amplified by music, lighting, and shadows. The party never truly ended. Rooms rotated, corridors shifted, windows became mirrors, doors loops. Time blurred. The climax arrived quietly. I found evidence, a small console hidden in a side room, screens showing feeds of every guest, tabs displaying metadata, logs of social media, hacked profiles, voice recordings, AI-manipulated interactions. The host had orchestrated a digital web over us, feeding our reactions in real time for recording, analysis, and blackmail. Police arrived after a neighbor noticed unusual activity. They confronted the host, a meticulously organized manipulator with multiple constructed identities, whose calm, intelligent demeanor masked years of surveillance, obsession, and manipulation. The guests were freed, shaken, fragmented. I left the house in the pale morning light, rain misting the street, neon reflections now muted. The city was quiet, the world normal, yet every sound, the hum of my apartment appliances, distant traffic, floor creaks, carried new weight. I realized I could never unsee the control, the invasion, the orchestrated fear. I am safe now technically. The host is apprehended. Evidence collected. systems patched, but the memory remains. My routines, my habits, my privacy, they feel fragile. My trust is fractured. The boundaries I once took for granted now feel porous. I think about the party often, about how easily a person can manipulate perception, environment, and emotion without ever touching a victim physically. About how surveillance, observation, and control can spiral into obsession. Sometimes I sit by the window, rain tapping softly, distant music drifting, fog curling along the streets. Shadows pool in corners. I think about trust, about identity, about control. And I know this, safety is not just doors or locks or laws. It is vigilance. It is awareness. It is understanding that someone somewhere could be orchestrating your world, and that the only true escape is to see it coming. You can leave the house. You can lock the doors. You can call the police. But you can never unlearn how it feels to be watched, measured, and manipulated in silence. And that is the lesson the party left me with. Story 10. Hashtag the stranger in the photos. Rain made the city look unfinished. Every streetlight bled into the pavement. Every taxi smeared yellow across the black road. Every window reflected someone who looked almost like me, but thinner somehow. More hollow. I had moved into Westbridge Hall 3 weeks after my breakup. Not the dramatic kind. No screaming. No broken plates. Just months of being corrected softly until I stopped trusting my own memory. You're too sensitive. That didn't happen. You always make things darker than they are. By the time I left him, I had become careful with myself. I checked my tone before speaking. I apologized when furniture creaked under me. I learned to make my loneliness small enough to carry. College was supposed to be a reset. New city, new dorm, new people, but mostly it was silence. The radiator hissed at night. My mini fridge hummed like a trapped insect. Music pulsed faintly through the walls from other rooms where people already knew how to belong. I did not. So when Mia knocked on my door that Friday and said, "There's a party downstairs. You should come," I wanted to say no. Instead, I looked at the rain sliding down my window and said, "Maybe for a little." The party was in room 214. Blue LED lights, cheap speakers, too many bodies, warm soda, wet coats piled on the bed. Someone had hung silver streamers from the ceiling, and they moved whenever the door opened, like nervous fingers. I remember laughing more than I expected. I remember Mia handing me a drink and saying, "You have sad eyes, but not in an annoying way." I remember a boy named Theo trying to explain jazz to me while a remix shook the walls. I remember the window fogging up from everyone's breath. I remember looking at my reflection in the glass and seeing, just for a second, someone standing behind me. Tall, blurred, still. When I turned, there was only a crowd. I told myself it made sense. Parties do that. Reflections lie. Light bends. I wanted to believe it. The photos went up the next morning. Mia posted them in a public album with a caption, "214 survived the storm." I saw them while sitting alone in a cafe 2 blocks from campus, holding a paper cup of black coffee between both hands. Soft jazz played from a speaker above the pastry case. Outside, rain tapped the windows. People came in laughing, shaking umbrellas, smelling like cold air. At first, the photos made me smile. Mia with glitter on her cheek. Theo mid-sentence, one hand raised like a professor. He's sitting on the floor near the radiator, smiling at something outside the frame. Then I saw him, in the mirror behind us. A shape in a dark coat. No face. Just a pale oval where a face should have been. I zoomed in. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from Mia. "Do you know this guy?" Under it, another photo. Same figure. Different corner. Near the door. Behind the streamers. In the bathroom mirror, partly hidden by steam. By lunch, the group chat had found him in every photo. Not obvious. Never centered. Always background. Always blurred. But there. Mia wrote, "Okay, seriously, who invited Trenchcoat Cryptid?" Theo replied, "Probably someone's friend." But no one claimed him. No one remembered speaking to him. No one remembered seeing him move. That should have been the end of it. A weird party story, campus rumor, a thing to laugh about before exams. But that evening, I got an Instagram follow request. The profile picture was a black square. Username, _remember214. No posts, no followers, following one person, me. I stared at it until my phone locked. Rain tapped the window beside my desk. The mini fridge hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened, then closed. Footsteps passed my room. Slow, measured, then stopped. I held my breath. A phone buzzed. Mine. A DM. You looked happier when you thought no one was watching. I did not sleep much that night. I told myself it was a joke. Someone from the party. Theo maybe. Or Mia's weird roommate. People liked making things into stories online. But by Monday, everyone had received something. Mia got a cropped photo of herself whispering into Theo's ear, sent to her boyfriend. Theo got a voice note. He played it for us in the library, volume low. At first, just static. Then his own voice. Drunk. Quiet. Saying something unkind about a professor. Then another voice, calm and close to the microphone. People are most honest when they think sound disappears. Theo's face drained of color. That's AI, he said. But no one sounded convinced. My email came at 2:13 a.m. Subject line, you still sleep facing the wall. There was no message body, only an attachment. A photo of my dorm room door, taken from the hallway. My name tag was visible. The little blue sticker Mia had put on it. The tiny dent near the handle. Below it, one sentence. You always choose corners. Cafes. Classrooms. Rooms. People. ***. My hands went cold. I reported the account. Blocked the email. Told campus security. They said what people always say when fear has no clean shape. Could be a prank. Keep screenshots. Don't engage. I nodded. I became very polite. Fear makes you polite. Avec later, met Adrien. He was in the cafe where I went after my afternoon lectures. The one with fogged windows and soft jazz, and a woman behind the counter who remembered that I never wanted sugar. Adrien sat near the window, reading a paperback with a cracked spine. He had gentle hands, dark hair, a voice that never rushed. You're in my psych seminar, he said. I looked up from my coffee. I am. He smiled, not offended. Back row. Gray sweater. You take notes by hand. My stomach tightened. Then he added, sorry. That sounded less creepy in my head. I laughed because he seemed embarrassed. Because he seemed human. Because I was tired of being afraid of everything. We talked for 20 minutes. Then 40. He didn't ask too much. That mattered. He listened the way lonely people imagine being listened to. Like each sentence deserved a place to land. When I mentioned the breakup, lightly, almost by accident, he didn't say the usual things. He said, it's strange, isn't it? How someone can leave your life and still keep editing the way you see yourself. I looked at him. Outside, neon reflected pink and blue in the rain. For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. I wanted to believe it. Adrien began appearing naturally. At the cafe, at the library, outside the old cinema, after a student screening I hadn't told anyone I was attending. Coincidence, he said, lifting his hands. I promise I'm not following you. He smiled. I smiled back. Maybe I was overthinking. He knew things, but they were small. That I hated cinnamon. That I reread texts before sending them. That I listened to old jazz when I couldn't sleep. You mentioned it, he said once when I froze. Did I? I think so. I told myself it made sense. People forget what they say. Especially people like me. People who had been trained to doubt their own minds. The messages from _remember 214 continued. Not every day. Worse. Randomly. A photo of Mia's building. A screenshot of Theo's dating profile with his private prompts circled. A voice note sent to all of us, stitched together from things we had said at the party, rearranged into sentences we never spoke. One night, I received a map. A red line traced my walk from campus to the cafe to the pharmacy to my dorm. At the bottom, you move like someone trying not to be found. I threw up in the bathroom sink. The fluorescent light buzzed above me. Pipes knocked in the walls. Someone laughed in the hall, bright and far away, and I hated them for sounding safe. I showed Adrian the message the next morning. He looked genuinely disturbed. "This is surveillance," he said. "I know. You should go to the police. Campus security already." No, his voice was soft but firm. Real police. That firmness comforted me. So did the way he walked me back that night without making it feel like a rescue. At my dorm entrance, rain dripping from his coat, he said, "You're allowed to let people protect you." I almost cried, not because it was romantic, because I had forgotten protection could sound quiet. 2 days later, Mia found the second album. It was not public, a private link sent from a fake email. Hundreds of images, the party from impossible angles, the hallway before anyone arrived, Mia applying lipstick in the mirror, Theo unlocking the window, me standing alone by the radiator, thumb rubbing the scar on my phone case. Close-ups of phones, laptop screens, open bags, dorm keys. A photo of Adrian was there too. At first, that made me feel better. He was a victim too. Then I zoomed in. He was standing near the window, not looking scared, not laughing, looking directly at the camera. And on his wrist was a thin black band, the same band visible on the blurry figure's wrist in the mirror photo from room 214. My blood seemed to slow. I opened our texts, scrolled, read again. The first message he had sent me after we exchanged numbers. "Made it home okay?" I had never told him where home was. Another, "Try sleeping before 2 tonight. Your brain gets cruel after that. Asterisk asterisk." I had never told him I stayed awake until 2. Another, "Jazz helps, but not if you keep replaying the same song." I had never told him the song. The room tilted. The radiator hissed. My phone buzzed. "Adrian, you found something." I backed away from the phone like it had breathed. Another buzz. "Don't let Mia make this ugly. She likes attention." "You don't. Asterisk asterisk." Then, "I know you're scared, but fear is honest. That's why I trust it. Asterisk asterisk." I called Mia. She answered on the first ring. "Do not go back to your room," I said. There was silence. Then her voice lower. "Why?" "It's him." Rain hammered the pavement outside. My reflection shook in the dark window. "Adrian," I said. "Adrian is the man in the photos." Mia did not ask if I was sure. That saved me. We went to the police together. This time we had evidence. Screenshots, metadata, the private album, the voice notes, email headers, door camera footage from Westbridge Hall. The officer who took our statement was calm and tired looking. She listened without interrupting. Her pen moved steadily. When she asked if Adrian had ever been inside my dorm room, I said no. Then I remembered the blue sticker on my door, the email photo, the way my closet had smelled faintly different last Tuesday. Clean, chemical, like someone else's laundry. My throat closed. "I don't know," I said. "They told us not to contact him. They told us they would find him. But people like Adrian are built from exits." By morning, his Instagram was gone. His campus email bounced. His name did not appear in the psych seminar roster. There was no Adrian Vale. The student ID he had used belonged to someone who transferred 2 years before. The phone number was prepaid. The apartment address was a short-term rental paid with a stolen card. The police found equipment there. Cameras the size of shirt buttons. A laptop. Burner phones. Printed photos arranged in folders. Not just us. Other parties. Other cities. Other girls sitting alone in cafes, lit by windows and weather, looking like they were waiting for someone kind. My folder had a name. Not mine. The corner girl. Inside were notes. Class schedule. Sleep patterns. Food preferences. Breakup history. Old social media posts from when I was 15. My mother's maiden name. A list of phrases that made me relax. A list of phrases that made me apologize. At the bottom, written by hand, "She distrusts herself. Entry point, validation, asterisk asterisk." I read that line 3 times. Then I stopped reading. The confrontation happened by accident. 2 nights later, I was at the police station giving another statement when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice note. The officer told me not to open it. I did anyway. His voice filled the small room. Not Adrian's exactly. A cleaner version. Warmer. Closer. AI polished. "You keep giving my work to strangers," he said. "That hurts more than you think." The officer's eyes sharpened. They traced the call fast because he stayed connected too long. Maybe he wanted to. Maybe obsession makes people careless when they feel unseen. They found him 3 blocks away, in a parking garage washed green by fluorescent lights. He had been watching the station entrance. When they brought him in, he did not look like a monster. That was the worst part. He looked tired, ordinary, a man in a dark coat with rain in his hair. He saw me through the glass and smiled with such sadness that, for 1/6 my body remembered comfort. Then he mouthed something. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for me to understand. "I knew you." I looked back at him. No, he had collected me. There is a difference. The case moved slowly after that. Cases do. Police found more victims, more names, more constructed selves. He had been Adrian to me, Daniel to someone in Portland, Elias to a girl in Boston. Each version attentive, each version shaped around a wound. He studied loneliness like a lock, then made himself the key. Mia transferred rooms. Theo deleted every profile he had. The party became a story people whispered about until a new scandal replaced it. But I stayed, not because I was brave, because leaving would have given him the shape of a ghost. I changed my locks, covered my webcam, scrubbed my accounts, learned about metadata, privacy settings, tracking links, voice cloning, burner numbers, people search sites. I stopped posting in real time. I stopped confusing attention with care. Some nights are still hard. Rain still makes me check windows. A phone buzzing after midnight still empties my stomach. In cafes, I sit with my back to the wall now. I watch reflections. I notice wrists, coats, pauses, the unnatural stillness of people pretending not to look. But I am not only afraid. That matters. Fear can become a room, or it can become a door. I am learning the difference. Sometimes I think about the first photo, room 214, blue lights, wet coats, silver streamers, all of us laughing, unaware of the person in the background turning our lives into material. We thought privacy was something we lost by sharing too much. But sometimes privacy is stolen from the quietest places. A glance, a habit, a wound, a song played at 2 a.m. because you cannot sleep. Trust is not the absence of fear. I know that now. Trust is a boundary someone chooses not to cross. An obsession is not love made intense. It is control wearing the face of understanding. So when people ask me what scares me most, I do not say cameras, or strangers, or dark hallways, or blurry figures in photographs. I say memory, because someone can enter your life, rearrange the evidence, speak gently enough, and make you wonder whether you invited them in. And the most terrifying rooms are not the ones where someone hides in the dark. They are the ones where someone watches long enough to learn exactly how to turn on the light.